Our main project is to make a font, and we're going to do it whilst we're learning how to use Glyphs 3. As we learn, we'll be building our font. And once it's built, what better way to show it off than to make a typographic poster, or maybe even a set of typographic posters. What I'd like to see in your posters is, how does your font work? How does it look and feel and act? We'll break this course into easy sections. We're going to start by sketching and planning our font. Once we've got that sorted, we will set up our glyphs file. Then we'll start making our main character set, moving on to numbers and punctuation. With our full character set in place, we'll look at spacing and kerning, and then on to testing. Once we've tested and exported, that's it, we're done. We've got our full font in place. Follow along with each lesson. If you want, make the exact same style of font that I'm making, or if you're feeling a little bit more adventurous, create something new. I'd love to see what you come up with. Remember to download the intro pack from the resources section below. I've added some cheat sheets in there that will really help you get started with learning shortcut keys. This will help you speed up your process no end. And I'll try and refer to those keys as well as we go. So if you haven't already, let's get Glyphs 3 installed. At the moment there's a 30-day free trial available on the website, and let's get ready to make a start. Before we start designing our font, let's gather some inspiration. That could be from type design books, or it could be from magazines or type specimens, or even just anywhere on the internet that you've seen some nice typography. And do some sketches. Knowing where you want your font to go and how you want your font to be used is going to be a huge benefit when we're actually designing in Glyphs. There's an intro pack available for you to download through Skillshare. In the intro pack, you'll find a sketchpad template with metrics lines already on there. You'll also find a Glyphs file, which is pre-made with all the characters that we're going to be using. And you'll find a Glyphs cheat sheet with all the shortcut keys listed. So get sketching, and when we're ready, we'll set up our first font file. Let's start by making our Glyphs file. First we'll choose New File, then scroll down to Latin, turn on Prepare Glyphs For, and check Basic, and create file. This font will be uppercase only, so we're going to remove the lowercase. In the left-hand panel, you can go through all the characters that you want to add to your font. In the intro pack download, you'll find a Glyphs file all ready to go that's been prepared for this lesson. If you open up your Glyphs template from the intro pack, this is what you'll see. Let's give our font a name. Open up the information panel. I think I'll call it Adam Sands. The units per M will keep at 1000. Version is just as you change a new version. Make sure to add a weight axis and update features. Under masters, we can see our master name. Ours is regular. The weight we're going to change to 400, and you can also see our metrics values. For this font, I'd like to use an overshoot value of around 16 units. So for each metric, there'll be a border or a margin of 16 units for the overshoot. There are lots of plugins for Glyphs, and one that I can't do without is Show Stem Thickness. So if you go to Plugin Manager, you can scroll down or search for Show Stem Thickness, and then click Install. Obviously, I've already got this installed, so once you've installed it, restart glyphs and it will be activated. And what show stem thickness does is it gives you this visual of how thick a stem is or a section is. So for this one, you can see that this is 146 units wide. You could use the ruler tool, but this is an extra thing that you've got to turn on and turn off, whereas the show stem thickness tool is always on, and it just makes life that little bit easier. If you can't see the show stem thickness working, just go to View and then turn on show stem thickness under View. Now let's save our file, and with it saved, we're ready to go and the fun stuff starts. So in the next lesson, we're going to be looking at making our square glyphs. It's good to group glyphs by shapes. We have rectangles, circles, and triangles. The reason we group them is because we'll be using elements from those glyphs to remake other glyphs. You should always try and start with a H. It establishes width, height, and stem thickness. We'll find that the stem from the H is the piece that we're going to be copying and pasting into new glyphs most often. For this font, I'm going to use a stem thickness of 160. I'll duplicate this stem to create both sides of the H. Using our arrow keys and the show stem thickness tool, we can space our stems perfectly. Now let's add the horizontal stem. This will be slightly thinner than the vertical stem for optical balance. The vertical stem is 160, so I'll type in 150 for the horizontal stem. Using spacebar, we can preview the shape. Now we've made the H, we can move on to making the I and other square characters. Let's copy the stem from the H and we'll use that to make our I. Now we'll make the E, F and L. F and L share most of the characteristics of an E, so we'll start with an E. Again, using the H, we'll use the H stem and the horizontal bar from the H. We'll copy that into the E. To see if your node is perfectly in line with a metric line, it'll show either a circle or a diamond. A circle means that it's within the boundary of the overshoot. If it has a diamond, it's perfectly in line. With the E looking good, we can now use the elements from the E to quickly make the F and the L. So that's our H, E, F and L made. All that's left is a T. T uses the exact same principles as we've made for everything else here, so I'll leave you to make a T on your own. To make our round letters, we're obviously going to start off with the O. And to find the width and thickness, we'll use the H. Using the H as a guide, I'll make an oval. For optical balance, it's likely that your round letters will need some overshoot. And this is where our 16 points of overshoot comes into play. Now I'll duplicate that shape to make the counter of the O. I'll resize it to make sure that all the widths are even. Selecting both parts of the O, I'll cut the shape using Command and X and paste that back into our O glyph. The curves on our O at the moment don't look the best. but fit curve really helps to even those curves out. The idea behind the fit curve tool is that it uses a percentage scale to change the amount of curve between two nodes. Using Control Option Command and numbers 1 to 8, you can change the value of that fit curve so it corresponds to the dots underneath the percentages on the fit curve tool. We have a little problem with the O, it's filled in, and that's because the path directions are wrong. We can see this by the arrows both pointing to the right. An internal should go clockwise and an external should go counterclockwise. There's a couple of ways we can fix the path directions. The first way is to select the path, right click and reverse selected contours, or we can select all paths in the glyph, go to path and correct path direction. I prefer to use correct path direction. I think it's best to let glyphs determine which path should run which way. Now onto the C. Let's bring the O in as a component. I'll decompose the O and cut a section from the O to form our C shape. Let's make the Q. Once again, we're going to add the O as a component, but this time it will stay as a component and we won't touch it. All that we're going to add is the tail of the Q. Keeping the component O means that if we make any changes to our original O, those changes will also be made in the Q. We'll start with the C to make our G, importing it as a component and decomposing it once again. We can take the horizontal stem from a H and place it into our G. I'll line everything up and just make sure that it's all nice and neat and balanced. Using the Fit Curve tool to keep the consistency of all those curves. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at triangle letters, and for me that is A, V, K, M, N and W. I like to start off with an A for my triangle letters. I'll copy and paste the stem from the H and then skew that into the perfect diagonal shape. Using the H as a reference for width, I'll move the stem of the A into the correct position and duplicate that and then flip it horizontally to create the other side of the A. When putting two lines together like this, the top can look a little fatter than the bottom, so we bring it in at the top to make it look more balanced and a bit more even. I'll use the bar from the H to make the bar on the A and just put it into position. The A looks a little thin, so I think I'll move those outer lines further out and reduce the width of the bar. I want to keep the triangle section of the A as neat as possible, but I still want to have some control over it. So I'll join the two pieces together, but with this node in the middle, I want to be able to independently control the left and right angles. And as you can see, by just having one node, that's not so easy. So we can use an open corner like this to just move one section at a time or one line at a time. This is really useful for corners where you're having to move stuff quite often. It means that you only move one part rather than two parts. I want this section to be exactly the same as the V, so I'm going to make a component from this piece. So if you select it and then go to component from selection and then call it something that you're going to remember. And that creates a new glyph. Then if we go to our V, we can add this new component into our glyph and then select that and flip it horizontally. There we have our V. Because it's a component, if we want to change anything for the A, it's also reflected in the V. I like to have them linked in that way, just so there's consistency between those two characters. For the W, we're going to use the same component as our starting point, but instead of using the component as it is, we're going to decompose it. So we've got these two components in here now, but we can't move them because they're taking the values from our initial glyph, from that component glyph. These components are set to automatically align. If we want to move them, we need to disable the automatic alignment. If we right click and go to disable automatic alignment, that will give us full control of movement. So we could just put them together like this, but our font is quite narrow, and so this wide version of a W would look odd and out of place. So what we're going to do is decompose this and squish this in so it looks more in keeping with the type that we've already made. Next, let's work on M and N. I'm going to use the H to make the width of the N correct. And to create the diagonal section, I'll duplicate one of the stems and just move over the nodes. This will want to be thinner, so I like to just move the nodes in a little bit more. I think that looks pretty good, so I'm going to copy all of this and use this as the majority of the M. But obviously the M needs to be a little bit wider. Not too much wider though. We've just gone outside of the margin, so let's just put some positive margin in there just to make sure that we can see what we're doing. Now I'm going to use that middle stem, copy it, paste it, and then flip that horizontally and place it just in that spot there. Check where everything is. Then I want to merge this together. Take out those two nodes at the bottom just to make our M shape. And add in an open corner there again. It's always good to add in an open corner where there's a section like that. It's looking a bit wide, so I'll just bring it in a touch. The K should be relatively easy. I'm going to start off with the R. I don't need the D. Just take the stem and that leg of the R, and we're just going to use that for the K. You can see that the majority of it is already there. Just move this piece up to about the center, select it all, copy and paste it, and then just flip that vertically or horizontally even, and paste that in place. Really good looking K. I'm pleased with that. To finish this off, I'm just going to merge those two pieces together and add in that open corner. Just move this in. And then, yeah, we'll move that one in as well, just so it looks like it's really connected. We're making really good progress, and we've only got a few letters left. Next up is hybrid letters. This is where we combine elements from our square glyphs and elements from our round glyphs to make some square round glyphs, such as a D, a P, an R and a B. I'm going to start with D, and using sections from I and O will create that D shape. I'll copy and paste the I stem into the D, and selecting only the right hand nodes from the O, I'll copy those and paste that into the D glyph as well. With those in place, I'll realign them. We don't need overshoot on a D, so we just need to make sure that those are perfectly lined up. Again, using that diamond shape as reference. We'll do that for the top and, of course, the bottom. Then we need to extend this shape on the right to make it into a solid shape. At the moment, it's not connected, so we need to make sure that it's connected. And we do this with the pen tool, and that's using the P shortcut key. I'll just make some lines and connect that shape up. I'll do the same for the bottom, selecting the first node and then joining everything together. And you can see that that shape has now become a full shape. When it's filled in like that, you can see that it's everything's connected up. And that's our D shape. With just a little bit of tweaking, we'll make sure that everything is nice and balanced and the correct width. From the D, we can then make a P shape. I'll copy and paste the D into the P. I'll select this curve and rescale it to create the curve of the P. I'm using the arrow keys up and down to make all those widths correct. This is where the Show Stem Thickness plugin comes in really handy, because we can see all those thicknesses as we're moving those nodes. We don't have to turn on another tool in order to see that. With a bit more tweaking and refining of those nodes, and we're ready to make the R. Essentially, the R is just the P with a leg. So we'll add the P and then draw in a leg. I like to use the rectangle tool and then just select the bottom two nodes and drag those out. U and J I'll make from O and H. Starting with the U, I'll copy the stem from the H, I'll copy the O, place that into the U, and then I'll use the O as a guide for the width of the U. And then we'll build the U using these sections. The bottom of the U is too tall, and that's because we've taken it from the O. What we want it to do is to resemble more the curvature of the D. And we can do that by bringing the nodes down a little closer to the bottom, and then using our Fit Curve tool, which is Control, Option, Command, and I'm using 7, we can make those curves look nice and neat once again. To make the J, we can use the U, copy and paste that into the J, and then we're just going to remove the left-hand side nodes. I'll chop it just there on an angle. Remove those, and there we have our J. For the Y, we're going to use our component again. We're going to flip it and then decompose it. We'll select these nodes and move that into position. And using the stem from the I, we'll copy and paste that into our Y. And center those two objects. Then I'll tidy up these two nodes and we have a Y. To make our Z, let's use a T. I'll copy and paste the top of the T and duplicate that to the bottom for the Z. And then copy the stem of the T and use that for the diagonal part of the Z. An X can be quite difficult to make, but for this style of font, I prefer to use the diagonal shape that we've already made and decompose it and then scale that down. I'll then copy this and paste it into place and essentially mirror that to make an X. Select everything, make sure that it fits the cap height and merge it together. Remember to put in those open corners once again. I'll just move everything in so it fits the rest of the font. So we'll shuffle these around and make a really nice looking X. S can be another tough letter, but let's break it down into sections. We're going to use a C. We're only using the top part of the C, so we'll copy and paste it and move these nodes into place. We'll fix these dodgy curves by using the Fit Curve method. And now let's copy and paste our top into the bottom. We'll just flip it upside down and place it in the overshoot area. And now we need to join these two pieces together. So we're going to create a link between the top and the bottom. When we have a basic link in place, we'll group everything and merge it all together. At this point, it's a good idea to correct path direction. These blue square nodes show that these can be corners. So what we want to do is double click them and turn them into continuous lines. This helps with the flow of the letter. And now we just need to move our nodes and arms into place to make a really nice looking S. Now we've drawn all the uppercase letters, we have all the knowledge we need to make the rest of our characters. So I'll leave the numbers and the punctuation to you, and I'll see you back here for spacing and kerning. So now we have all our letters in place, we can now start on spacing. It's good to use spacing groups. So we'll use a H, an O, and a V or an A to create spacing groups. For our straight-sided glyphs, I'm going to use H. And for H, let's give this a value of 60. We'll do this for both sides. And an easy way to replicate both sides is using equals and bar. So that will take the value from the left hand side and use that in the right hand side as well. Now we can apply the same value of H to I, M and N. So selecting those characters all together, we can go down to the bottom left and input the values of those side bearings. And we're just going to type H in both the side bearings values. So we can see here that the side bearings are equal to H, which is 60 points. For our round letters, we'll use the O. We can either put in a number value in there and then use O as our standard for other curved letters, or we can use an equation. I sometimes like to use half of H, so putting in the equation of equals H over 2, which then gives us 30 points. And again, on the right hand side, equals bar will give us a 30 point value on the right hand side as well. So just testing those by pressing O and H a few times, we can see how those spacings look. We can apply the O values to Q, C, G, 0 and sometimes an S, depending on how close it is to an O in terms of the curve. I'm going to use V as our master, but we need to remember to disable automatic alignment. Do that on both the A and the V. A V has lots of negative space, so we'll give it a small value on the side bearings. We can apply this to the Y and to the A, and also sometimes to the W, X and T. Any letters that have straight and curved sides We can use the straight value of H on the straight side and the O value on the curved side. You can, of course, just use values for any glyphs that you want. You don't have to group them. I just find that it makes life lots easier if we have groups. So on the L, I'm setting this to its own with 16. But on the left hand side, it has a value of H. Because W has slightly less negative space than a V, but we still want to use the V value, we can just use an equation like V plus 10, and that will give us the V value with an extra 10 points. When spacing, regularly check against other characters. Press Option Command F to bring up text strings. These are really useful for checking spacing and to see if you've got any missing glyphs. Similar to spacing groups, we can make kerning groups as well. Let's set up some kerning groups. So for A, I'm going to give this a kerning group of A. This might apply to the Y or the T as well. And for V, I'll give this a kerning value or a kerning group of V as well. And then between the A and the V, we can make this minus 20 or maybe more. It might need more than that. If we look at the bottom of our glyphs panel, we can change the blurriness of our text. And what this does is it allows us to see the negative space between each letter. So as you can see here, we've got a little bit too much between the A and the V in comparison to the H and H. So let's just make that minus 40 just to narrow that gap a little more. This is a really good technique just to see what those negative spaces are. So now let's do the other side of the V and the A to match. And obviously this should be a minus 40. So if we type A and V a few times, we can see that that spacing is consistent. And now we're going to do the W. So if we apply the V group value to W, we can see that that pulls it in by minus 40 as well. However, I think that might be a little bit too much. So let's give this its own value and we'll make that minus 30. And do the same on the right hand side as well. Kerning groups can be applied to any letter. So let's apply the V group to the Y. And you can see that that brings through the same values as for the V and the A. So we'll work our way through making kerning pairs and kerning groups as we go. Kerning and spacing takes time and it takes a lot of testing as well. So as we go, test letters and strings of words next to each other and tweak and refine. It's always about tweaking and refining. We can't expect to hit it exactly right on the first time. So we incrementally make better changes. And sometimes some changes impact others, but making kerning groups does make that a little bit easier to manage. So next we're going to do some testing. We'll export the font and try it out in Illustrator. We've done a lot of kerning and spacing and now it's time to really give it a test. So we need to go into a letter and we're going to press Option, Command and F to bring up the strings, the text strings. Now this is where we really see how those spacings have been affected and if we need to change anything. Go through as many text strings as you possibly can. The more combinations of letters and words and phrases that you can find, the better. Something I always find is when I start using it and typing in Illustrator or InDesign, I'll always find something that I haven't noticed whilst actually making the font. So you'll always just end up going back and tweaking something until you find all those little pieces that you've missed. Before we export, let's add some extra custom parameters into our font. We're going to add enforce compatibility check. This just rules out any compatibility issues, and also let's add the update features. Just in case we forget to update features before we export, this will prompt it to do that as we export. It's a failsafe. So before we export, let's update features anyway, just in case there's anything that needs to be updated. We don't have any open type features or any special characters, so there isn't anything that needs to be updated. But just for good practice, we'll click update anyway. So now with all the features updated and double checked on the information panel, we can export our OTF file. So click export, find where you want to export that to. I like to create an export folder and then click open. To be sure that it's PostScript, we need to check the OTF if it's not OTF. If you want to export for web, you can use the WOFFs and the WOFF2. And before you export, make sure that the remove overlap and auto hint are both checked. And that's it, we've exported our font, and here you can see the Adam Sans regular OTF. To install fonts, I really like using FontBase. It's a font client. It just means turning fonts on and off are just a little bit easier. So to add the font into FontBase, just drag it in and search for your font, Adam Sans, and turn it on using that little dot. The green dot will indicate that it's active. And if we jump into Illustrator, make a text box and search for a font, there it is. Knock up the point size and you can see just how good it's looking. Let's try some typing. Let's type Adam Sans, if I can spell. And there we are, proof that this font works. Congratulations, you have just made your very first font in Glyphs 3.